How's it
Hello.
going?
Yeah, good. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks
I
for
think
having me.
I'm excited, and I realized that I forgot to completely put a thing into my little story saying, "Hey, we're talking about how to retire early." But I was like, you know what? I reckon everybody actually knows who you are already, and probably has an idea of maybe one of two things that we're going to talk about. Because I know that retiring early is something that you talk about a lot, especially with like Perla and with the Get Rich Slowly podcast, which is awesome if people don't know that one already. But also with your book too, which is pretty exciting. Kids Aren't Cheap. And I was thinking about this actually earlier this morning because I have 3 kids, and that saying of kids aren't cheap, I think we must throw that around a lot. So what a perfect title for a book.
That's how it actually came to be. I kept writing it in the book. Like I'd say something and I'd be like, oh, kids ain't cheap, kids ain't cheap. And then in the end, I didn't have a title. We were kind of going back and forth with my publisher, and I said, kids ain't cheap. I keep writing it. We might as well call
Why
it
not?
that, right? So, yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. It seems almost easier to call it something that
yeah,
you say all the time.
indeed.
So I think I've got a few questions for you, which I think will be helpful for everybody watching this. And I think more people will slowly start to join as we kind of keep on going, hopefully. But I think we're going to focus today, if it's okay with you, more around how people can actually retire early. Because obviously I certainly came across you when you joined up with Perla and you're part of the FIRE movement, which is pretty cool. And I think that that's something I know I talk to a lot of clients about, especially younger ones, where it's like, just start building now. You don't know what's going to happen in however many years' time. Just get going. And one of the things I think that I get asked a lot is, how can somebody actually calculate the amount of money that they might need at retirement? So hopefully you can speak to this, Anna.
Yeah, so there's this study. It's called the Trinity study, which is quite famous, and it looked at a bunch of different portfolios of investors when they hit retirement. So before I want to caveat this conversation that none of this is financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. This is just for entertainment, educational purposes
Yeah.
only. Please don't take this as personal advice. So straight up, that's the disclaimer, full out. So let's jump into it. There's a study called the Trinity study, which looked at a bunch of different portfolios and looked at how much an investor would need to save up in order for them to never run out of money. And what they found is that you need about 25 times your expenses in order to withdraw about 4% of your initial portfolio value. So when you're investing, often there's capital, there's how much you've invested, but then there's also dividends that go into that. And that hopefully historically will grow over time.
Yeah.
And so what you might have initially now might be a smaller amount, and when you retire, it might be a much larger amount. And what they found in that study is that if you take out 4% a year, that you shouldn't technically run out of money. So the idea is that you need about 25 times your expenses. And now some people want to be a little bit more conservative, so they want to actually save more than 25 times their expenses. And this also accounts for inflation as well. So that's the rule of thumb. That's not the rule. So for your situation, it might be different, especially if there's life situations that happen later on, such as you have kids or you buy a house and you have a mortgage. You have to take that into consideration as well. But that's the kind of rule of thumb of how to calculate how much money you might potentially need if you want to retire early.
Yeah. And I think it's an easy calculation as well. It's easy to wrap your head around, 25% of expenses. I should know what my expenses are, times 25, easy.
Yeah.
You know, it's a great simple calculation to be able to go, yeah, I'm on track with this. This is great. And I think that probably ties into my next question, which really is around what are some of the common strategies, I guess, that you've seen. And certainly as you were writing the book, I think you probably found even more on how to actually increase those savings and reduces your expenses. And is that something that I think people should be focusing on at the different phases of life that we all go through?
Yeah, I think that there's a big emphasis on reducing your expenses. Always has been, especially, I think this is more predominantly also targeted at women,
Yeah.
People who kind of look at the budget, what we're spending money on, how we can make it cheaper. So that's a huge part of it. The thing is, yes, you might save out on a latte here or there, but you should really think about it holistically. Can you get a better mortgage rate? Can you reduce your expenses when it comes to your energy bills? Or can you get rid of a car if you have two cars, or think about transportation differently? Those can be growing your wealth that way. Passive income, which happens obviously through investing. It's nice to have other forms of passive income, so you can potentially write a book, get royalties, have a course that you're selling. The thing is, if you can reduce your expenses and increase your income, you're going to have a larger gap of money that you can invest. And the larger that gap is, the quicker you're going to get to that number that you've calculated, 25 times your expenses. And also, by reducing your expenses, the amount of expenses you have is going to be smaller. So you're going to reach that number even quicker. So it's just a way to think about it. There are two levers that you can kind of do: reduce the expenses, increase the income. And hopefully lifestyle creep doesn't go with that as you as you increase your income as well.
Yes, definitely. And certainly the one I see a lot of people starting to talk more about is increases in tax as well, and trying to then navigate that, because as those continue to change and continue to increase, how do you then counter those as well? So yeah, it is interesting. And certainly I know I've done a video where it was on YouTube, that was looking at some of the different ways that we save money in our family. And I think I had more responses, people emailing, sending messages, whatever, because we actually use a wine subscription to save money. And it doesn't sound like it would work, but we actually use it as a way to be able to, when we go to a party, instead of, you know how you just ad hoc buy a gift to take with you? Yeah, it just meant that all of a sudden we know exactly how many parties we can go to. We've got this case of wine. We can't go to any more. But it then means that we're set with, this is how much we're actually spending when we're going and visiting friends and hanging out and that kind of stuff. And it was amazing once we brought that in, how much we actually saved just doing that slight change. But yeah, like you said, we also have we're a one car family, and I think it's the best thing. I'm amazed more people don't actually do it. I realize it can be a bit of a jump. I don't know. Do you have a car? How many cars do you have?
It's funny you asked. Just bought a second car, so it's you know, it's probably not the best situation to be asking me. The only reason is because our original car is about 20 years old, and it was time for us to get a new car. We wanted to buy a 7-seater because I had family coming over for a visit. So we were like, okay, we'll buy a newer car. It's not brand new, a new to us car. So saving some money, because again, if you buy a brand new car, it loses value as soon as you drive it off the lot. So it's funny because even just that mind shift where we're like, now we have 2 cars. We don't have to juggle who gets the car. But honestly, we made it last for so long. And by having 1 car, yes, you have to do a bit of management, but it can save you so much money. You don't have to pay for 2 insurances. You don't have 2 vehicles that cost money sitting there. So yeah.
Oh yeah. And I think one of the things that was the I guess unintended flow-on effect of having 1 car is you also get to spend better time with your family as well, because you're all in the car together, which, if I don't know, I have every now and again I think about, oh, maybe we should get a second car, and I kind of go, but then when would we be all together as a family just chatting about random family things? And it'd be maybe at the dinner table, you know, maybe when you go on a walk or whatever, but actually sitting in the car, going somewhere, you got 20 minutes, you're all there, you can chat about life. And it's great, but it's
all about balancing your budget and your values, right? And the two can be conflicting.
Oh, they can. They can, but that's okay. We all have to work out what's best for us. So, all right, let me ask you some more questions. Um, how important is investing to achieving early retirement, and what are some recommended investment strategies? Again, not that this is investment advice, but just broadly, generally for entertainment purposes.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. There's there's a variety of assets that you can invest in. There's cash, there's bonds, there's shares, also ETFs. So for those who don't know, ETF is a bundle of shares in a specific fund. And there's property, and there's also alternative assets that you can invest in. Each of them have a different risk tolerance, and also they have an expected return. Often higher risk may potentially result in a higher return. Not always the case, right? The market doesn't always go up or down. So the thing is, if you're just saving money in a bank account, you're going to have very minimal interest that you're going to earn on that. Whereas investing, you can potentially have higher returns, and it's somewhere around 7%, even higher if you're investing in Australia historically. So again, past is not indicative of future returns, but it is something to consider. So I think in investing for a lot of people might potentially be a strategy. The thing is, you need to consider the long-term effect of that. So there's a lot of volatility that happens within the market. It goes up, it goes down. If you're going to only invest for a short time, you don't have the opportunity to ride out that volatility. So it's just something to consider. So investing is a strategy for a lot of people who want to get ahead, especially when it comes to long-term goals around retirement, around retiring early, especially if you're holding it for 7 or plus more years. So it is valuable to kind of think about those different asset classes. You might have a different goal. If your goal is to purchase a house, it might be too volatile to invest, and therefore a savings account might be a better choice for you. But only you know your risk tolerance, only you know what your goal is, and you have to kind of weigh the asset class, the risk, and your goal all together.
Yeah, that's definitely true, and certainly I think I've noticed that over the years, as I've worked with more people on their journey to home ownership or building wealth through investing in property, it does get to a point where even I sit down and say, you've got to start diversifying. You really need to start looking at other options. There are more options than just property. But certainly, property is pushed in a big way here in Australia. I don't know why. I mean, obviously it goes up, but there are definitely other options that are available. And over time, I think hopefully through, some of the different, different ways that people are learning about money these days, hopefully we start to see a bit more diversification, which is always a good thing, I think, anyway. But from your point of view, do you think there are different ways that people can move forward and invest and retire early, whether they are single or whether they are a couple? Or do you think it's kind of the same, doesn't matter what your relationship status is?
Yeah, well, I think I'm just going to caveat that a lot of things in the financial industry, or the things that we talk about, come with a lot of privilege. And financial literacy is like one of the biggest privileges that people have, and that actually differentiate between those who can build wealth and those who potentially don't have the opportunity. So can everyone retire early? Maybe not. I'm going to be completely honest, depending on your life or what kind of job you have or how much savings or capability. But the thing is, we can always better some of our financial habits. So in terms of your question, whether you're single or you're partnered or you have kids, in a lot of cases, if you are single, you probably have no dependents. You can take more risks in your life, especially if you're younger. You have a longer timeline and horizon for things to go wrong, I guess, in the same way that you can try different jobs and you're not worried in that space. So I think you can potentially take more risk if you're a single person and wanting to invest in the future. And in fact, you have no one, your expenses might be lower as well. Maybe you have roommates, so you have cheap rent, or not. I mean, it's Australia, no one has cheap rent, let's be honest here. But there are ways to do that. It does, as partnered, if you're partnered, there are also savings that happen. You're both paying for the internet, you're paying for the rent. So it might be easier to pool your money together. It does get difficult when you get to that point where you have a family.
Yes.
And I'm sure you can speak to this. I can speak to this firsthand. I have a whole book about it. Kids ain't cheap.
Yeah.
It can derail your FIRE journey. So your financial independence, retire early journey, because now all of a sudden you have kids. They're an additional cost. There's school fees. There's early childhood education fees. All of that is a massive, massive expense. While at the same time, you might potentially be losing out on income as well, right? There's, in a lot of cases, parents, predominantly women, predominantly mothers, take time out of the workforce. And that has a massive impact on your earning capacity, your ability to have money in your super because you're not working, so your retirement fund, and just your career trajectory. And those are things that you really need to consider as well. So going back to your question about retiring early, is it something that you can work towards? I believe that everyone can work towards having a better financial understanding, and also just have finances be a part of their life, whether it's through savings, investing, property ownership. Yes, there's specifically space for you. And if you don't have a lot of wiggle room, then think about your super. You're already investing in many cases. You're already employed by someone and money is going into your super. That's a way of investing as well. So if the government believes that you can invest for your retirement through super, chances are you as an individual, especially if you're someone who's scared of investing, you don't know how it works, think of it as like, hey, this is something that the government thinks is good for me in my future. Surely I can educate myself in a way where I can maybe do that too. So long-winded question, but I think we can all get better with our finances and work towards early retirement.
And do you think there is, I almost want to say checklist, which is not right at all. But there does seem to be, people go through it's almost like a mental journey before they realize, actually, you know what, this is something I should be starting to get interested in, and this is something I should probably focus on and learn a little bit more about. Do you have an idea of, you know, what that pathway is, and at what stage people start to think, actually, I really should be engaging in this more, really?
So I think some of the first things that potentially you should do is make sure you have a safety net. So make sure that you have an emergency fund set aside. The rule of thumb is around 3 to 6 months worth of expenses, because you don't ever want to be in a situation where you need the money, you invested it, and now you have to pull it out when the market is potentially being volatile and so forth. Plus there's tax implications that come with investing. So just something to be aware of. Make sure you've got your financial house kind of sorted, which is your emergency fund, making sure you have a handle on consumer debt. That's really important as well, because that's going to set you up better in the future. And then when you are ready to potentially invest, there's a couple different ways that you can consider doing that. There are various platforms. I work at one, I work at Pearler, so it is true, but there's a lot of different ways that you can invest. If you are someone who wants to maybe start really small, around $5, there is the opportunity to potentially look at micro investing funds. If you have more money, such as $500 plus, there are funds that are CHESS sponsored, which means you have direct ownership in those shares that you can kind of invest in. And the thing is, as anything in life, you can read all the books, you can listen to all the podcasts, but you're not going to be able to learn to ride the bike until you physically get on the bike and pedal. And that's the same with investing. You can read all the books and have an idea, but you will never know how you feel when the market goes up and when it goes down. And that's the only way to really learn. Again, none of this is financial advice. So please talk to a financial advisor if you have any questions. And
I think one of the things that certainly I was excited by when Pearler came along was that I had been investing through some of the other bigger platforms, and they make it very complicated and very intimidating if you aren't in that space. Whereas certainly Pearler has made it very accessible, and the amount of additional education, even just on the website, makes it so much easier to work out, okay, is this right for me? And to provide, I guess, the comfort. And I know you just mentioned, you know, CHESS sponsored shares and everything, probably not something that everybody would necessarily understand, but it's a good thing. It means that, you know, it's all backed. You actually have a bit of paper that says, yes, I own this particular share, which is really important if anything untoward does happen. And, you know, that kind of stuff has happened in the past, let's be honest. So being able to actually just have that, you know, track record of this is mine, kind of like a title with, you know, a property, it's the same thing, is actually really a great thing to actually have. But let's perhaps shift gears a little bit and talk a bit about how does somebody even stay motivated? Because that's probably the hardest thing, you know, especially if you're sitting there and you're one of those people that's going to really focus on, I've put a little bit of money in, now it's going to happen. It's 3 days later. Has it jumped up? Has it gone to the moon?
Yeah, that's the funny thing. I think for a lot of people, when they start investing, they can't help but check like every minute, every hour, every day, constantly. And it's really hard to stay motivated for a very long-term goal, right? Especially if you're planning on even if you're planning on retiring early. Early might not be 5 years. Early might be 30 years, right? It depends on where you are in your journey. And it does get harder as you get older because you have less time to allow for money to compound. So sometimes ways to stay motivated is, or that I like to even do for myself, is look at how much I've saved in expenses and be able to be like, hey, listen, if I wanted to take a mini retirement, because you don't have to really retire early. If I wanted to take a mini retirement, I could actually afford to take 6 months off or a year or 13 years, whatever that might be. That might be something that's really motivating to move towards, because even saving for 6 months of expenses, that's a huge amount that you could potentially save and feel excited about, instead of, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to do this for 35 years. So having little goals along the way that you can celebrate. You can also celebrate just being consistent. Often just being consistent, and it's referred to as dollar cost averaging, often just consistently putting money in, and it's, you know, you're just doing it regularly. You're doing it regularly. And even just celebrating that, being like, I invested every single month or every second month. These are small things that we can do in order to keep ourselves motivated, because having a long-term goal of, you know, saving money for retirement or retiring early can take years and years and years. Another thing is to just automate things and think about, hey, listen, I'm not thinking about it. I got paid. I'm putting that money into my investment. It's getting invested. I don't have to think about it. And because I don't have to think about it, I have paid myself back in time. That's, again, a huge value in your life, to be like, I just got some time back. I got some time back, and hopefully that can keep you motivated. Another thing is getting dividends. When dividends hit your bank account, so for those who aren't familiar, often ETF shares, some of them will pay you a dividends, which is basically like if you're owning a rental property, getting the rent of that property. And rental income. And sometimes, you know, it's as small as 50 cents, and that can grow. And like, you know, it was 50 cents before, now it's $5, and now it's $50, and now it's $5,000. Those are small little things that can keep you motivated. So yes, investing for the long term can be a long, tiresome journey, but if you create these little goals along the way, or little pieces of excitement, it can help you get there quicker.
So what do you do to stay motivated?
What do I do? Some of the things that I do is I like to track my net wealth. So my net worth. Yeah. And it fluctuates depending on where we are. So on life, I was on parental leave, so I wasn't getting as much income coming in, but it was keeping me consistent. If we don't track those things, we don't know what we need to change or adjust. So if we're just like letting things happen, we're never going to know if we're getting better. It's back to like, you know, a sports analogy. If you're not tracking your time on running or how much you're lifting at the gym, you're never going to know if you're getting better. So even, so that's the kind of stuff I like to track. I like to track my net worth. I used to like to track my consistency. So when I was working full time, am I consistently investing? Yes, I am. How much? And those are the things that would keep me invested and or excited about being invested. And then the last one, which I think I mentioned earlier, is actually seeing how many months or years I have invested and how much time I could potentially take off.
Yeah, that is a good one. I'm probably a little simpler than that. I just work in like $10,000 increments. And so I I will do something. I will, usually it'd be like, yay, and I'll get a bottle of champagne and be
Yeah.
like, woohoo, another 10,000 in, yay. You know, I
That's a
try
good
to keep
one
it simple
too.
because,
That's a good,
yeah,
yeah.
I know I'm not taking the money out. So, and if I am, it's got to be for something really, really important. And so recently, actually, I used some of my shares to be able to buy our dream home. And that was hard because I've spent so long celebrating those little incremental wins. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, this is going backwards, but I get a house. Ooh,
Isn't
that's
it funny
okay.
how much of money is the mathematical side? We know what we need to do. We know what's going to be better for our future and our wealth creation. And then there's the emotional side where you're like,
Yes.
oh, I don't know. I felt very similarly. I sold a rental property, an investment property I had in Canada. It was my first home. It was like what I saved for so long. And then
Oh, yeah.
selling it, like, yes, it helped me buy my family home that I have with my kids and my partner, but it was the emotional connection that I had to that
Yeah.
was hard. So not everything in finance is just numbers.
That's true. That is true. And it is because you've gone on such a massive journey with that first property. I do feel like it takes you a lot longer to make that decision. And I know the very first investment property I purchased, I have been chopping and changing for probably the last 3 years around whether I should sell it, whether I should keep it. And I've never lived in it, but still has that emotional attachment.
Yeah.
Whereas other investment properties, as soon as they're not performing, it's like, oh, scratch that one off the list, quickly sell that one and get something else. Yeah, but there is that weird emotional side of money that we all do forget about, but we have to take into account as well. Anyway,
I think that's why having a strategy is also really important. Knowing when you want to sell, knowing what your goal is, because otherwise you might not ever sell. And an example for me was I was on parental leave and I knew that you get taxed whole world income, and it made sense for me to sell at that time. And again, it's a part financial decision that you make, but a part emotional one. So knowing your strategy, knowing when you want to sell out of an asset class or when you want to buy one is really important to keep you on track.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we have almost hit the half-hour market. So could you tell us a little bit more about your book?
Yeah.
And then we might have to call it quits if that's okay.
Yeah, perfect.
But tell us more about your book.
Okay. So my book is called Kids Ain't Cheap. It's right behind me. It's how to plan financially for parenthood and your family's future. What I realized was there was a huge gap in financial literacy or financial information around people who are planning on having kids or even in those first years of childhood. So there's a lot of information around investing and, retirement, and there's a lot of information about, paying down debt or whatnot, but there's nothing really about what happens in that crucial time when you have an increase of expenses, you have a new human that you're looking after, and potentially a decrease of income because you might be taking parental leave or taking some time out of the workforce. And then there's the additional cost of early childhood education and care, how to plan for school fees, how to plan for one of the biggest costs in your life. Yes, we love our kids, but they ain't cheap. So this book basically kind of fills that whole gap because there's things that you might not consider as a parent. I know that I had friends who were looking for a house while they were on parental leave and they couldn't get a mortgage because they weren't making any money. And it's just something that seems obvious, but unless someone tells you or unless you think about it, you might not have considered it. So this book kind of covers all those different things along with how to think about your parental leave, how to make sure that you have money in your superannuation. That's a big one, especially if you're taking parental leave and you're not thinking about the fact that, you might retire with $180,000 less than what is expected to be a comfortable retirement. Like, this is something that is very disadvantaged for women as well. So this book is for all parents. I try to be inclusive as possible, have some amazing stories from a variety of parents going through everything from IVF and considering the upfront costs of that, all the way to how to talk to your kids about money, how to invest for your kids. Like, that's another topic in itself that you might want to consider. It's there are implications around investing for a minor. So it's all of that. So if you're planning for the future, I would definitely say grab this book. You know, someone who's expecting or is buy it for them. That's it. Great baby shower present.
Yeah, or even before that.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
I mean, maybe not a wedding present or a, hey, you've just moved in together, here's a gift. But yeah. I think having that little bit of leave time is always a good thing.
Agreed. I'm surely you know, especially when people are planning to purchase a house or whatnot, having as much lead time, knowing what your goal is really important.
Definitely. Yeah. And so where can people get your book?
Yeah, you can, I have a link in my bio that you can find it. You can find it on Amazon, Booktopia, wherever you get your books, your local bookstore, go and support them, order it through them. And
do you have an Audible book of it as well?
I don't. I don't.
That'll be next.
I was debating, it didn't happen, but I do realize that parents are so time poor. In being a parent, I definitely listen to more audiobooks than I can sit down and read. So it's hopefully in the list of things. Yeah. On the cards, yeah.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining me. It was lovely having you. And enjoy the rest of your day. And I look forward to seeing more of what you do and hopefully seeing an audiobook soon. Yeah,
it's true. Actually, there's later this year, there'll be another book coming out that I'm co-writing with Tash Etchman from Tash Invests.
Nice.
So
what will that be about?
You'll have to find out. But I'll give you a clue. It is a little bit about investing and a little bit about, creating a life where you might not have to work forever. So,
well, she's certainly done a lot of travel and has been able to certainly design a life that she's happy with. I must say, I do sometimes see her TikToks and I go, to be single again.
And young and be able to do that. It makes a huge difference if you can start young and if you can invest early. It can enable you in so many different ways, whether you want to leave a toxic job or a toxic relationship. Just having the financial security to do that is so important. And
I think it was when she went to, I think she went snowboarding. She went somewhere for a snow season.
Yeah.
And I think that one got me the most because when I was young, twice I took 5 weeks off and I went to Japan to snowboard. I was like, this is the best. And there is no way I could do that now with 3 kids in tow.
Yeah. Very different lifestyle. So, but,
totally but awesome.
Lifestyle design is definitely something that everyone should consider. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for having me. Yeah.
And I look forward to that one coming out sometime soon. And thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much. All right. Chat soon.